we'll just wait like a couple minutes. Why don't we, Christine and I could just answer any questions or just have a quick check-in with you two while we're waiting for everybody else. No pressure. How are you guys feeling and doing? And
Go ahead, Nate.
I mean, I'm fine. It's just like very repetitive nothingness.
I've never played so many like board games. I don't even think I've played this many board games like as a child. Like we started playing poker and like Monopoly, and like that's what we look forward to now. What the heck?
Well, we taught my kids how to play Rummy 500 and poker, so that's what it's getting like pretty good.
Yeah, like
Good at it. How are you doing, Nina?
It's okay. It's like, I guess, frustrating that there's no end date. Like no one knows. And I feel like even if someone just told me like, oh, the end date is like August 15th, I'd be like, oh, okay. And feel a lot better, I think. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because it's like, oh, 2 more weeks. But I think if they went any further than 2 more weeks at a time, like it would just like, imagine if they told us at the beginning of April that we'd be this far into it. You know what I mean? Like
Too much. It would have been too much, I think.
Yeah.
Like they just keep on inching and inching forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking forward to
Having things to look forward to.
Yeah, like never wanted brunch so bad in my life. Just to go somewhere and like have brunch, like would be such a luxury right now.
We're really feeling that, Yeah, we heard yesterday, my daughter Sophia is 16, so she's a sophomore. And last night, well, her best friend turned 16 yesterday. So that was like a really hard day for them because, they've been friends since they're 4. So you remember looking forward, that's a big milestone. And so she was really sad because they couldn't spend time together, and we did as much as we could, and we tried to make it really special for Emma, and I think it was. But then last night we're really close friends with her parents too, and we FaceTimed as families, and Katie, Emma's mom, shared that Wyoming Seminary, where they go to high school, is talking about not opening until January.
Oh, wow.
That has to be so devastating for kids that age, because like everything, I feel like everything at that age is so dramatized, and like everything could be the end of the world, like
Right.
That's gotta be hard.
Well, it is kind of the end of their world,
Right.
Yeah, it is. How did she, what was her reaction?
I thought she was going to just like burst into tears. Yeah, it was really strong, And Sophia's pretty stoic. Like she's not super dramatic, like as a rule, she's pretty steady. And out of all my kids, like she's probably the most steady, least drama, just pretty even tempered. And so to see that reaction from her was like just completely out of the ordinary. Yeah, so I'm just really praying that they could go back to school in the fall, because it's just so impactful to them. And it just really upset everybody, that idea that, and then of course, if they keep extending it like this, like who's to say that they might not extend it again?
Right.
And, just, I don't know. It's very strange. I will say, like, this is really hard. And it can't be, we can't like dismiss that or pretend it's not. It's just really hard. So, and these practices help for sure, but they don't, make it go away.
Right.
the difficulties. So I guess that's a good segue into the content. Christine's leading today. So.
Yeah, it is a good segue, because the question that I wanted to open up with today is, what are you feeling? And the reason I wanted to start there is because we are so accustomed to the question, how are you feeling? So in just a casual conversation, how do people typically respond, or how do you respond when someone says, so how are you feeling? Mostly we ask, how are you doing? And what we're really asking is, how are you feeling? And most of the time, out of politeness, we say what?
I'm good, I'm fine.
I'm good, I'm fine. Unless and until you ask such a question to a sixth grader. And a couple of months ago, I was teaching about emotions and emotional intelligence out at Dallas to a group of, this particular group, they were sixth graders. And I came into the room, they were all gathered in the library at these little round tables that had about 5 chairs around them. So I came in, I noticed that there was one boy sitting at a table all by himself. But the question I asked is, so what is everybody feeling today? That's how I launched into it. And of course you could see them all going, oh, we're good, we're good. I said, no, you didn't hear me. They're so accustomed to, how's everybody feeling? I asked, what is everybody feeling? And the little boy who was sitting by himself raised his hand and he said, I'm feeling really angry. And he pounded on the table. Well, you could see his teachers, the librarian, the support staff person in the back of the room, mortified that this is what this child said in response to my question, what are you feeling? But he was giving an accurate representation of what he was feeling. And I said, tell me a little bit more about why you're angry. And he said, well, here I am. I'm sitting at a table by myself. I'm always sitting at a table by myself. Despite all the promises that some of these other kids make that they're my friend, I'm still sitting at a table by myself. And I said, what does that make you feel? And he said, sad and hurt. And he didn't use the word betrayed, but it was how he felt. So just that little moment, right? What are you feeling? Not how are you feeling, what are you feeling? I'm feeling angry. And then the next question, what's under the anger? And in his case, I'm feeling sad. That's what he was really feeling. He was feeling really sad. And so when we start to work with mindfulness of feelings, which by the way, that's what today's lesson is, this is what begins to happen for us, is that something can come up, because it was very clear in the pounding of the table. And I think I asked him, or I think actually I didn't ask him. He just said, I'm so angry. I feel like I'm going to explode. So there was this real bodily sensation of anger happening. So he was aware of that and he was able to name it. But when you took him just a little bit deeper, you could see that underneath that, there was this sadness that was present. And I always tell people that underneath that kind of anger and even rage is usually something like sadness, something like hurt, something like I just feel really betrayed, or I feel like there's nothing really that I can do about this situation. But for kids especially, and actually adults, it's often much easier for us to get angry than it is to say, I feel really sad. I feel really terrified. I feel alone. I feel betrayed by people here in this room that tell me that they're my friends. So in essence, he taught the class that day because that was what the topic was about. Are we able to, based on physical sensations that arise, are we able to name what we're feeling, and then make a decision, a choice, a conscious choice about how we're going to express that feeling, how we're going to understand it, what we're going to do with it. But most of us, do you remember the class that you took in emotion, in the literacy around feelings? I mean, we didn't. And it comprises such an important part of who we are as human beings, and it's so complex. But the reason that we bring mindfulness of feelings into lesson 5 is because, if you remember, lesson 1 was about anchoring. Lesson 2, breath. Lesson 3 and 4 about the body. And now we're ready to talk about feelings and the complexity of feelings. So I want you to just take a moment, and in response to that question, what are you feeling? Just try to connect to that. Or the other choice you have here is to think about a feeling or a way that you've been feeling over the course of the last week or so that's been really difficult for you. I want to teach you something that is called the self-compassion break. And I want to lead it as a guided meditation. And when we come out of it, I want to talk to you about how you can use it as a tool in an immediate moment when you're feeling something that feels really powerful, when it feels like it's something you want to push away, or when it feels like it's just completely engulfing you, okay? So I want you to try to stay with something, choose something you want to work with that either reflects how you're feeling right now or something that you've been grappling with over the course of the last week. Sound good? Okay. All right, so I want to invite you to come into that comfortable seat or to take your seat, always remembering that you have an invitation to keep the eyes closed, or you can keep them open, whatever feels best for you. Remembering that if they're open, your gaze is just very soft, maybe forward and just down a bit. And I want to begin by inviting you to bring your focus to your breath. Just as it is. Just noticing the sensation of the breath as it comes in, and the sensation of the breath as it leaves. And maybe allowing everything to soften on the exhalation. And now I want to ask you to call to mind that feeling. That you've been grappling with. And I want you to give it a name. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe it's fear. Just name it. Where do you feel this feeling? if it had a location in your body, where is it living right now? Where is it taking up residence? If it had a size, how big is it? How small is it? If it had a shape, what shape is it? In this now moment, what color is it? If you could imagine walking out to the very edges of it, what exists beyond it? What's there? If this feeling had a message, what's its message? Just notice whatever arises. Don't search for anything, just let whatever arises arise. Can you let this feeling, whatever it is, can you just let it be there? Allowing it, maybe making some nice space for it. Can you hold it there with a lot of kindness, even tenderness? Knowing that whatever it is, you're not alone in feeling this. Can you allow, make space, being kind? We're going to begin to exit out of the practice by just returning to the breath. Just taking the last minute to sit in the quiet. And whenever you're ready, but only when you're ready, gently open the eyes. So we have such a small group here. I'd love to know what that was like for you, how that felt, what experience you had with that.
My emotion was frustration, and I felt like I was holding it in my back. Is that a possible option? And I feel like by the end, in my head, it was making like a wing shape, like over my shoulder blades.
Yeah.
And then as I was like walking along or whatever, I was only thinking about the left side, and now my left side feels better and it's only on my right side.
Yeah. Did it have a color?
It was like an orangey brown.
Mm-hmm. How about well, you said it was kind of shaped like a wing.
Mm-hmm.
So what were the edges like?
I couldn't really see. So in my head, it was like this. And the top and bottom parts, I didn't really think about. But when I got to the end, it was like a cliff.
Yeah. That part of the meditation, if you were to walk out to the edge of the feeling and look beyond it, what's there is for me, it's a really interesting moment. And oftentimes what's there is like the void, or just like this vast sky. It's just sort of beyond what it is that I'm feeling, that there's something beyond. Mm-hmm.
So descriptive.
How did it feel when I asked if it had something to tell you, what would it say? And I always hesitate to ask that or to include that, because I don't want anyone scrambling for an answer. I just want whatever it is to arise, and sometimes nothing arises.
I took it to mean that like the cliff part meant it was just going to end really fast one day. Like it wasn't going to be a fade out. Yeah.
It was just going to drop away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Great. Good. Now, how did it feel when I said, can you just allow it to be there? Because who wants to feel frustration, especially in my back?
I mean, I don't think I felt any differently than before on that part, just because I feel like I've been feeling this way for a long time. So it just kind of is there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How about the kindness part?
I mean, that was around when the left side stopped hurting.
Yeah, so sometimes we can feel a softening of whatever it is, or a diminishing, or almost sometimes even a fading away of whatever's there. The kindness part is a really important part of today's teaching that I'll talk about in a minute, but that's an awesome, what you shared is awesome. Thank you. How about you, Olivia?
So mine was like a thing that happened on Sunday, And like I woke up and it was really sunny and like it was a really nice day, and then my dad yelled at me for sneezing. Like literally yelled like, Jesus, Olivia, like you sneezed, we're in the middle of the pandemic, cover your mouth, like screamed from the kitchen to where I was sitting. So that's how it started. And then like I, you know, went outside, got some air, went for a walk, you know, whatever. And then in the evening, my mom was on me. Like, hold on, I could direct quote her. This was because I wouldn't log into Hulu for her. She said, "Why am I so nice to you and you treat me like crap?" So so it was just like taking on those emotions, and like it's like you want to call it guilt, but it's more shame. And like that really screwed with my serenity level. So then the next day I was talking to my dad about it yesterday. I'm like, yo, I'm like, mom is like, she was on me yesterday, what's up? And he's like, you know, this is a really hard time for like her, it's a really hard time for everyone, and kind of just like talked about how, you know, she gets her energy from everyone else, and like she doesn't have any sources of that now, and like it led me to believe that like he's also having a hard time for it. So the meditation kind of took me from like the guilt and shame portion of it to like the empathy for the struggle that they're going through, and like that they're not able to, like it's coming out sideways, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what I'm interested in, first of all, that's all very interesting that that's what you were able to do during that meditation. I'm also really curious about, what does guilt or shame look like?
It looks like cancer.
Yeah.
Like red, misshapen organ.
Wow. That's
I don't
powerful.
know if that's true, but like that's what came in my head. So
Well, we don't know what it, you know, I mean, it's look, what we're aiming to do is to become very mindful. If you think about like kind of how it all unfolded, the first question I asked is, what is it? So let's give it a name. Let's label it. Let's give it a name. Let's call it out. And then the second question was, where is it taking up residence right now? And the residence part is interesting, because what we know about feelings is that feelings come and go like guests, like visitors. And many of us get really freaked out about how we feel because many of us live with this idea that this is going to stay with me forever, especially when it's uncomfortable. It's not. It's kind of like if someone knocks on my front door, a guest comes, a visitor comes, I know they're not going to stay forever. I might not want them here, but I have to ask myself, how am I going to be a host to this feeling? Because it's here right now. Guilt and shame is tough to be a host to, because it can feel like that. It can feel malignant, like a cancer. And it's like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that, but it's here. And in this meditation, the environment was created for you to actually just have it be there. So when we get to the part about, can you allow it? Can you give it some space? How did that feel?
So I felt like at first I thought it was like my heart was going fast during meditation, so I thought it was there. And then like I had like I hold the stress in my back of my shoulder, so I thought it was there. So then I focused on that, but I still felt like my heart going. So it must have been somewhere up here. But yeah, I feel like I was able to create some space for it, and that kind of, there was a little bit of relief in that.
Mm-hmm. So what's important about what you said is, when you create the space for it to be there, that's when the compassion can step forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you're able to say, whoa, and have the insight that this is not easy for my parents. And my mother's outburst, my father's outburst is their own fear, likely their own fear, maybe even desperation, coming out sideways. There's a lot coming out of all of us sideways. But this is an example of how you can mindfully work with a feeling. Jen.
Oh, she's muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. My girls are taking a ballet class in our dining room. So what I experienced, first of all, I felt tired dropping in. Like I just felt like this deep exhaustion. And so I kept checking out because I struggle a little bit with some guided work at this time of day, especially because I get sleepy around, late afternoon. So when I came back, you were guiding us into like walking to the edge of it. And like I found myself in like a very shallow water, dark, like gray. And like I was walking to the edge of the shallow water, and like it just like, I got to the edge, and you guided us like what's beyond, like what was beyond that edge. And nothing had changed outside of there wasn't water on the other side of the edge. It was just the same color, and it just like expanded really far out, like, as far as I could see, essentially. And so that bothered me because it's accurate to how I'm feeling. Like I just feel like there's no end. But I thought it was interesting that the water stopped. And so I don't know, I have to kind of think about that a little bit more. I felt like a lot of, I felt all of it in my spine. So I felt like I was collapsing forward in my body, but when I checked in with my body, I was sitting up. So that was interesting. And when I intentionally asked for more space for it to be part of me for now, I was able to find that space I needed. And it just, just kind of quieted down a bit. But it was very big when you asked for the size of it at first, and then it shrunk. Yeah.
So this is one of the ways that we can teach and train children in feelings, is by asking them questions like, if your anger had a color, what would it be? What do you think 99% of people say, adults and children?
Red.
Red or?
Black.
Black. Size?
Huge.
Huge, right? Location in the body?
Back.
Heart.
Most people will say, a lot of women will say heart, gut. Many men, I find this really interesting, will say head. They feel anger in their head. And on occasion, women will say, and I hear this quite often from young girls, it was in my throat. And if you ask them about that, you usually get them to a point where they say, because I can't say it. I'm afraid to say it, that I'm angry. So these prompts are really interesting ways to begin to become more mindful about feeling. And if you notice, by the time we get to the end of the meditation, if you were able to allow the space, and sometimes you are and sometimes you're not. It doesn't always work this way, but when you allow the space, it kind of gets to settle and we become accepting of it. And that's where we bring in the idea of kindness. So I said at the beginning of class that I wanted to teach you something that you could use in the moment. Now, we couldn't go through that entire process in the moment of being very triggered or just feeling sort of engulfed by a very, very strong feeling. But the way that you could use it is a shortcut. And this is the shortcut. And this is what is called the self-compassion break. And the reason I wanted to share this with you today is because I've been using this a lot. And it might sound kind of trite, but it's very powerful. And when I first learned about the self-compassion break, I thought it sounded silly, but I decided I'm going to give this a month. And every time I feel something that's really, really strong, I'm going to take the self-compassion break. And we've already done the aspects of the break. Step 1 is acknowledging to myself, wow, right now, I'm really suffering here. Right now, I feel really destabilized by grief or shame, or I'm feeling really frustrated, or I'm feeling whatever you would have named. You didn't name what that was, Jen, right? But whatever that is, but it was suffering, right? So that's step 1. I'm suffering, and use whatever word you want. Step 2, and this was part of the guided meditation that we did, but it was only a small part. Step 2 was, I know that there are people all over the planet in this now moment that are feeling in a similar way. Why do you think that's important as part of this protocol?
Normalizes it.
Because you're not alone.
I'm not alone. It normalizes it. Look, none of us are going to ever feel something that's completely original or completely unique to who we are. So what I'm suffering, I have to know that all over the planet right now, there's somebody who is feeling this. And this step 2 is not to minimize your suffering. It is not to say, well, oh, well, other people are feeling that too, right? It's not to do what we call comparative suffering, which is, well, there's other people feeling worse, because some of us are doing that right now. Why should I be feeling bad? No one in my family is in the hospital, right? That kind of thing. That's called comparative suffering. It's a complete waste of our energy, and it's very, very depleting. So step 2 connects you to what's called common humanity. It connects us to our common humanity. And then step 3, I'm suffering. I'm not alone in this. Be kind. Just be kind. Much like you would be kind in the face of a friend who's suffering, a family member who is suffering. So the self-compassion break is really meant to be used in the moment when you're having difficulty. It's a micro practice. But the first part of it is having the awareness that you're suffering in the first place, feeling the discomfort of whatever it is. And then step 2, I'm not alone in this. And step 3 is where everything starts to soften. When you say, be kind. Because a lot of what a lot of us are doing right now is what's called meta feeling. We're having feelings about our feelings. So it's a secondary level of stress. An example of that is, I'm feeling really anxious, and then I'm anxious because I'm anxious. Or I'm feeling really anxious, and at another level, at a meta level, I'm mad at myself because I'm anxious. I'm a meditation teacher. How can I be anxious? Or I'm really disappointed that I won't be able to watch my son graduate from high school. And then I'm upset with myself for being disappointed because at least he's not in the hospital. Do you see? Meta feeling is we all have feelings about our feelings, but we have to check in and ask, what am I feeling about how I'm feeling? Because oftentimes that's more painful than the actual feeling. Sometimes what I'm feeling about how I'm feeling is causing me more suffering than the actual feeling itself. What you went through in that guided meditation is really what we call in mindfulness meditation a protocol called RAIN. And it's awesome right now that it just started raining.
That was my distraction.
RAIN. And we're going to talk about this in the next lesson in a deeper way. RAIN. Recognize. I'm feeling something here. It's the recognition. Like that boy. I have the recognition that I'm just about to blow up because I am sitting here at this table, so that when I said to these kids, so what are you feeling today? He was able to answer. He had the recognition. Once I recognize it, can I allow this frustration that I'm feeling in my back? Can I just allow this sense of guilt or shame? We did a lot of I is investigate. Like get very, very curious. And the way that we got curious about how we were feeling was I asked you questions like, all right, how big is this feeling you're having? Where is it living right now in your body? If it had a color, what would it be? If you walk out to the edges, what do you see? If it had a sound, if it had a weight, get very, very curious about it. Do you have a sense of what the curiosity does or why that's an important part? Why investigate is an important part?
You kind of get down to the root of like why you're feeling that way.
It can definitely take you, the investigation can definitely take you into having an insight about why you're feeling that way. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
It takes it from an emotion to an object.
It takes, you can say it that way. It creates space between you and it. So imagine when you were a kid and you were out in the backyard, like digging a hole. I used to, love to be in the backyard. I would dig forever because I wanted to stumble upon an archaeological find. And I would dig because I was so curious about what I might find under the earth. When you start to get curious about something, you start to create a space between you and it. So when I get curious about how I'm feeling, I'm not so ensnarled up in it. It's no longer engulfing me, and I'm no longer kicking it out of my house because it's come to visit for a little while. I'm just sort of like, oh, this is kind of curious. Where's this anger coming from? Where am I feeling it in my body right now? What impact is it having? Oh, your example, Olivia, the shame. I kind of feel like my heart is racing. As I'm feeling this feeling of shame, it's causing my heart to race. Or, oh, now I'm feeling it in my back. So you create a distance. And it also allows you to be with it in a way that you're not in resistance to it. And this is really important when it comes to mindfulness of feelings. If you're genuinely curious about something, think about the last time you were really curious about something. It's almost impossible for the brain simultaneously to be really curious and to be really stressed out. Curiosity and stress or overwhelm or get out of my life, I don't want to feel this, they just don't exist together. So when you get to the I of RAIN and you go into investigator mode and curiosity mode, that's when you kind of start to feel that the feeling, whatever it is, starts to lose its charge. You're just kind of looking at it like you're taking a microscope to it. Oh, this is kind of interesting. I'm not afraid of it anymore. So RAIN, recognize. are A, can I allow it? Can I accept that it's here temporarily? I like to say, have you ever been chronically in a state of joy? Chronically happy all the time? No, right? Nor will you be chronically depressed or sad or angered, any of those things. So can I just, hey, allow it to hang out here? It's just coming to visit. I know it's going to pass. I go into investigator mode. And then N takes us right back to where we were with the mindfulness, the compassion break, self-compassion break, which is, can I be really nurturing about it? In other words, can I be tender and really kind with what's here? So if anger is pounding on my door, can I allow it into my home, like it's a visitor, and maybe even say, I'm not really thrilled about the fact that you're here, but you know what? Have a seat. I'm going to pour you a cup of tea. Why are you here? What do you need? What do you need for me to know? The reason I ask the question about is there a message here, is that oftentimes really, really strong feelings start to present themselves because they might want to get your attention about an action that you need to take or about an insight that's kind of trying to get your attention. So, hey, anger, have a seat. I'll pour you a cup of tea. What do you need me to know? Knowing that the visitor is always going to leave. So while they're there, can you be hospitable, kind? So I believe in your homework, there's a reading about rain. I think there might be a guided meditation using rain, but we did a version of that. It was just lengthier. So quiz, R is what?
Recognize.
Recognize. A.
Accept.
Allow, accept.
Sorry.
I.
Investigate.
Investigate. Remembering that investigation and curiosity can't live in a mind with what?
Stress.
Yeah, I mean, you can even experiment it. Try to be really curious and really stressed out and overwhelmed and resistant at the same time. It won't happen. And then N.
I don't know what N stands for, but it means have a cup of tea.
Nurturing. Yeah. That's a beautiful image to bring to mind, is nurturing. Right. So any questions? Jen, if you have a minute, I would love if you could talk about, because I don't feel that I do a good job of this, the difference between a feeling and an emotion. Or leave it till next time.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I also wanted to mention that the N also, you can include non-attachment as the other helpful word and concept to support you when nurturing and non-attachment are kind of equally as important there. And what that means is that we are not what we're identifying. So the anger, that example that Christine used as anger, not attaching to the reason why it's there, not attaching not making up a story about why it might be there. For instance, Olivia mentioned, that I don't remember the name that you gave. Was it shame? Were you working with shame?
Shame and guilt.
Shame and guilt, right. And so you had this experience, too, and you could get really caught up in the story of that instead of just working with the emotion itself. So in Chinese culture, in Eastern cultures, in Chinese medicine specifically, they view feelings and emotions as just a normal part of being human. And it's really different than how we adapt to feelings and emotions here. So what Christine asked me to kind of get into a little bit, which I think is very helpful, is starting to name feeling tones when we're digging down into a method or a tool to start working with this in our practices. So in your mindfulness, in your formal mindfulness practice, when you drop into your anchor, you're kind of looking for that. That's something we're establishing right from the get-go, whether that's an anchor in the breath or an anchor in the body. That anchor is established, and that's kind of like step one, right? Here I am, I'm sitting, I'm in my body, and I've established an anchor. Whether we're going into a concentration practice, which is noticing when we're pulled away and returning, or a vipassana practice, which is an insight practice where we're kind of working with what else is kind of going on inside. What we are layering on now is feeling tone, right? So in the body modules, the body lessons that we just went through, we were starting to work with the physicality of the body and what you might be noticing. Like, for instance, the meditation we did last week on kind of looking in and checking in to see if you notice if you're holding tension. Like, where is it? Can I be with it? So that was also a compassion practice because we were working with soften, soothe, and allow. So it was like that, oh, darling, right? I see so much tension here. Just relax, like that soothing kind of tone. So we've been working with the breath and the body, and now working with feelings. What's often easiest before we get into emotions, because in Eastern cultures, they see them as separate. So when Christine started today and she said, what are you feeling? Sometimes, we'll jump right in with saying, oh, I'm feeling angry, right? Well, what if before you got to the anger, you could see what tone was already there? So we Christine and I teach a little differently on this topic, so I feel like I'm confusing it a little. So imagine if we were just starting from the beginning and we dropped into the practice, and the feeling tone is something that's just there. So a good example of this is, because we're all women, we all experience a lot of hormones, right, moving through the system. And so what you might notice, what I'm noticing this week in particular, is that there's just a tone, an unpleasant tone there. And I don't know why it's there. And I can't think of a reason for it to be there outside of the global pandemic we're in the midst of. But there's a tone there and it's not pleasant. Or some days I could drop in and there's a really pleasant light tone for no apparent reason. It could be because of hormonal shifts. It could be because of whatever I ate for dinner last night. It could be because of a difficult conversation that I had. It could be because my son got home last night. I'm just giving you examples. In other words, whenever we drop into this heart space and just ask this internal prompt, what is the feeling tone right now? And there's only 3 answers. It's either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
Yeah.
And so, and what's really fascinating about this side of it is that we spend most of our time in neutral. And a lot of people get really uncomfortable with being in neutral because they kind of get a little lift from that pleasant tone, or some people get a little lift from that unpleasant tone. You see what I mean? So, but when we start checking in with this heart space, this space of feelings and emotions, right? We'll start noticing, and when we start naming, we start noticing that we could navigate from this understanding. So when I say we're developing this understanding of the inner landscape, something that's already here, that's a big part of it. And when I do my practices in the morning, especially for me personally, and I check in with that feeling tone, it informs a lot for the rest of the day. So if I start out with a negative tone, an unpleasant tone, I may know it's maybe not the best time to have that difficult conversation with my husband, right? If I'm starting out with a really pleasant tone, hey, maybe that's the day that I go ask for the raise, or maybe this is the day that I tackle this really big project that needs a lot of energy from me. And if I'm spending a lot of time in neutral, well, how can I just be in this neutral space and kind of invite that in as just being, this foundation to explore and get curious about. So feeling tones for me personally is a way to build on these concepts into emotions, but they work together. In other words, what Christine was saying earlier is, I'm angry. Well, what's below the anger, right? So if we know that we're kind of starting with this unpleasant tone, this tone is here, and then we notice through the day that we're just very easily triggered, we don't have to, put ourselves in a position that we're at risk for making more out of it than it's a lot of personal responsibility that we add into it, essentially. Does that make sense? And it's a place where we could start. Whether we're working with feeling tones or emotions, we could work with the practices, in the very same way. Because a feeling tone could be just as hard to hold.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? And sometimes harder, because we could be like, why do I feel so shitty? Mm-hmm. Right? There's no reason for it. And then we get hypercritical, like what Christine was saying. So sometimes what we call in Buddhist tradition is the second arrow. Right? So I may already have a nasty feeling tone inside. I recognized it. I'm kind of being really kind to myself and compassionate because it's just this part of being human. I can't control my hormones, right? And then we throw the second arrow because there's a lot of judgment to that, right? So even though I know that I'm supposed to be kind to myself, even though I know I'm trying to send compassion, there can still be a second arrow of judgment on top of that. So everything that you learned today can be applied in both ways.
Yeah, I've been struggling with the second arrow of not being self-compassionate about the fact that I'm not being self-compassionate. Right? And I think with the feeling tones, unpleasant, pleasant, and neutral, the way that you can see them at work, or even interpersonally is when I check in and I've got an unpleasant feeling tone, I'm likely not going to approach you. Like when we think about things or people that we avoid and we're not quite certain why, if we check back in, there might be an unpleasant feeling tone there that may or may not have anything to do with this person or this situation. In other words, we tend to want to approach when we have a positive feeling tone. We tend to want to avoid or resist when it's unpleasant. And then neutral, we could talk about neutral next time. Neutral is an interesting place, and many of us don't like to go there. Or if we are there, we might be there because we're just kind of in denial, or we've made ourselves numb about something or someone.
Right.
So I would love to bring this to a close by just using as our point of contemplation, just a one final quieting practice, just about 2 minutes. Bringing it all together by sharing a Rumi poem with you called The Guest House, which is just a beautiful way of summarizing a lot of the ideas here. And I think as you, again, just allow your focus to land in on the words as I'm reading and allow whatever images to arise, you'll get the message of the guest house. And if you know this poem, you might be hearing it very differently today based on our lesson. So again, I want to invite you to just close your eyes. Maybe just take a few breaths to come back into a settled state. The guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. She might be clearing out for some new delight to enter. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. And be grateful. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from the beyond. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes. Welcome them all. Each has been sent. I'm so glad you two came.
Yeah,
I needed this lesson, I think, more than anybody here. So
thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. That was a good one.
Yes, thank you. The next three really lessons are really powerful. Everything starts coming together. So yeah, we're more than halfway there now.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Have a great week, and I'll see you on Thursday.
yeah.
Okay, sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.